And yes, so thank you for joining us. I know some people are on holiday this week, so yeah, so thank you for being at work and joining us on this session. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So polite request if you could please keep microphones and cameras off to help us with the technology. And also if anyone is thinking of activating any AI note, which is ironic with the name of this title, if anyone is considering using any AI note-taking tools, if you could refrain from doing so, as we don't have the audience's agreement to that one. So that's all my please don't completed. Also let you know that the session is accredited by the CII for CPD purposes. So if it does meet with your development needs, you can record that on your CPD log. Another request, very, very open to questions. So please could we ask that when your question comes to mind, if you can pop them in the chat, and what we'll do is cover them at the end of the session. And final bit to advise you is that we are recording the session. The good news is that for anyone that couldn't make it, they'll be able to access the recording. And if there is anything that you want to review at a later date, you will be able to access it. So you will get sent a link, hopefully early next week. So that's enough from me. I will hand over to today's presenters. So we have Tony Darwell and Karen Stamford from Green Kite, and they are going to share with us an update and some information on the future of insurance, AI on autopilot. So I'm going to disappear now and hand over to the presenters.
Thanks, Alison. If you could just move on to the next slide. So for those of you that aren't familiar with us, Green Kite is a professional service firm which operates specifically in the UK insurance market. And we offer solutions which are really focused around our three core pillars of compliance and assurance, delegated authority transformation, and also insurance business support. And I think one of the facets of Green Kite is that we are very much of the market and for the market. So all of our team of consultants are very well kind of seasoned, well-honed industry professionals that have worked in the insurance sector, which we think helps us add some value to our clients. If you roll on to the next one, Alison. So my name is Tony Darwell. I'm the head of business development for Green Kite. I'm approaching 37 years in the industry, of which about 22 have been in and around the London market. I think I've done most roles within the insurance value chain, and that includes a couple of stints within MGA businesses like yourselves. And I'll just let Karen introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Karen Stamford. I'm Chief Experience Officer for Green Kite. My background is primarily projects, change and operations across reinsurers, syndicates, MGA businesses and brokers. And really I'm here to help people solve business problems.
Thanks, Karen. If we move on to the next slide. So as Alison mentioned, it is an accredited session, so it can count towards your CPD requirements. And those are the 6 learning outcomes for the session. So we'll hopefully at the end of this session, you'll understand how AI is impacting the industry. You'll also understand the operational implications of using AI within an MGA business. You'll have an appreciation of the corporate governance frameworks which are required to manage AI, and also the legal frameworks which support it. We'll also look at how product governance can be supported through AI, and also how to recognize AI for data and information usages. So I'll now pass over to Karen for the first part of the presentation.
Next slide, please. So how is AI impacting the insurance industry? we move on to the next slide, I thought the first place to start with how's it impacting the industry is to actually ask AI what AI thinks. So I've picked 4 market-leading AI solution providers. Many more are available, and ask them actually, what is it doing for our industry? Now, you can read them. They're very similar in nature. Words like revolutionizing and transformation are there. Personalization is a word that's used a lot. Operational efficiency, enhanced customer service, streamlining. The words are very, very similar. I think the problem is, where do you start and how do you make this happen? If you go to the next slide, please. So I thought I'd start with just giving you a bit of an overview of the types of AI that are used in the insurance market. AI is a generic term that's used a lot, but there are actually different types of AI. And I think where you'll hear the hype at the moment is actually specifically around Gen AI. So a year ago, Gen AI wasn't even kind of on the roadmap, and it didn't exist. And it's where there's been a lot of interest at the moment, and where a lot of the kind of the co-pilots and the Claudes and the Geminis are kind of really coming into their own and actually being used in kind of day-to-day environments. But the reality is that AI has been used in the insurance industry probably for about the last 30 years. So predictive analytics is one of the areas that we've been using really, really well, or the kind of cat modeling and exposure management is something that's kind of been well used in our organizations for many, many years. So what I thought I'd give you a quick run through of the different types of AI that we've got. So we've got machine learning, which is where we learn from data and improve over time without being explicitly programmed. So this is around risk prediction, premium setting, fraud detection, claims processing, by taking large amounts of customer and market data and improving iteratively as it goes. We've got natural language processing, which is where we understand, interpret and respond to human language. So this is things like chatbots and virtual assistants to help us have customer queries. This is to guide customers through insurance products online and to help us process documents like claims forms. What you'll find with the chatbots now is actually, in chatbots and virtual assistants, now seamlessly transition into human interaction. So when the chatbot has got to the level that it can do and can do no more, it moves you seamlessly into human intervention. And actually, we don't even see the difference now, other than waiting for that connection with that human member of staff. We've got computer vision, which is computers understanding and interpreting visual information like images and videos. Long ago, and we all know, we've seen kind of the Instagrams and the Facebooks of the world where you put videos up there and they weren't able to understand what was in that video, and it relied on human people to actually take them down if they were inappropriate. Now we're in a situation where actually they can interpret what's in the video and actually can take things down without human interaction. With insurance, we can use that for assessing property damage through photos after incidents or natural disasters and speeding up claims approvals. Predictive analytics is AI using statistics to forecast future events using historical data, and that's where we kind of all of our cat modeling and exposure data comes through. You know, it looks at likelihood of claims, assessment of customer risk, and identifying market trends for pricing policies. And then we've got Gen AI, which is the one thing that is kind of brand new and everyone's talking about at the moment. And it's various different, it's amalgamation of various different multimodality models. So basically it can take text, image, code, audio and video, and by learning patterns generate different outputs from that. So you can load text up to make a video, you can get a video to turn into text, you can create a podcast over lots of different areas of information. It's open to lots of different use cases now, both kind of within the insurance industry and in your kind of home event. What we could do with it in insurance is create personalized policy documents based on the information that we know about that particular customer. Or we could take multiple claims reports and pictures and documents and turn that into kind of a summarized report. So There's lots of different use cases and lots of different ways of using AI. And I think the introduction of Gen AI in the last year will really kind of push us forward with our use of AI, both internally within business and outside of business. We'll move on to the next slide. So when we look at how AI is disrupting the general insurance and Lloyd's market, the types of things that are going on, lots of talk about augmented underwriting, and we know that actually there's kind of a risk assessment model. We also know, and I'm sure Tony will talk about some of the issues we have regarding this with regards to kind of bias and how this how this risk assessment is being made. How do we make sure it's fair for the customer? We've got claims automation, so we've got faster processing. But again, if we're processing, what are the bias risks? Are we actually going to make sure that we give the right things to the right customer? We've also got dynamic pricing, so we can have AI-driven real-time premium adjustments. So actually, when we get new information, when we understand what's going on, how does that affect our premium prices? Does it go up? Does it go down based on what's going on and what the situation is? We've got regulatory compliance. So we've got fraud detection, which is, the AI said, was a key use case for AI. But we've also got it for things like compliance reporting. So if you think about the time spent going through all of those audit reports that we get, the audit findings, pulling them into a separate document or a separate solution to actually kind of assess, some of that could be done by AI. And then we've also got the kind of market impact. So actually it's risk appetites, reserving, capital models. I mean, things like I've seen use cases quite recently where actually people are prioritizing quotes. So you've got only time to do 10 quotes in a day, for example, and you've got 100 quotes coming in. AI could prioritize those quotes, put them in order, and learn what it is you're trying to do and the types of policies that you actually have successful quotes on, and put them to the top of the list. So your business is being prioritized through that list. Next slide. Okay, so there's lots of opportunities to use AI, and there's lots of different types of AI that are available. But actually, how do you make it work? What do you need to get it to do? Next slide, please. So my view is that MGAs that align their operations, talent and infrastructure around AI capabilities will gain sustainable competitive advantage. AI isn't just about having the right technology there. It's about having the right people, the right problems to be solved, and the right infrastructure and capability. It's not a one-stop shop. This cannot be achieved. AI development cannot be achieved by our IT teams. It cannot be achieved just by our business teams. It needs to be implemented with everybody. So here's some key areas that need to be kind of thought about to really help MGAs leverage their competitive advantage. First thing you need to think about is your organisational structure and talent. We need different skills. That doesn't mean to say the old skills aren't required, but new skills are. So we need our data scientists, we need our AI specialists, we need our tech savvy underwriters. We also need the experienced kind of old school professional who understands all the different scenarios that are there. We need the people that understand the business problems. This isn't about getting rid of people. This isn't about not using people's skills. AI is there to solve problems. The people that understand these problems are the people on the ground right now. What we need is complementary skill sets to help them solve problems in a completely different way. We need to create hybrid teams and collaboration models between the technical AI experts and your insurance professionals. We also need to upskill our existing staff to work alongside AI. Anyone that's tried to use AI quite recently, using either Copilot or Gemini or ChatGPT or anything like that, will know you need to understand how to write prompts. If you ask AI a really simple question, it will give you a really simple answer. You need to treat it like a graduate or like your 22-year-old son, who when you say, could you load the dishwasher with the plates from dinner, will only load the plates and the forks, won't look around the kitchen and find the saucepans and all the utensils that you've used. It's quite literal. So to be able to use AI correctly, we all need to become prompt engineers. And that means we need practice on how to use AI. We also need to look at workflows and ways of working. So actually we spend an inordinate time as an industry data processing, and actually what we should be doing is looking at the data once it's been processed, looking at exception reporting, making improvements, speaking to sub-cover holders about how we make things better, how we improve our data quality. We need to get to focus people on higher value activities and let AI take some of the responsibility away for some of the kind of lower value tasks. When we look at processes, we need to look at processes with AI capability in mind. So instead of thinking, let's just outsource that to our offshore team, actually, what can AI do for us? Can they take part of that process away? Can we redesign how this looks? So we need to think about workflow redesign, looking at these tools and understanding what the art of the possible is. We need to make clear decision frameworks between what can AI do and actually then where does the human need to step in? So we've seen that a lot in sort of the chatbot environments where you move from the chatbot straight to a human. We need to think about that in everything that we do. AI will get you so far at the moment, and then when does it need to go to an underwriter? When does it need to go to a human? Exception handling. AI isn't going to get it right 100% of the time. So how do we override that? What does it need to look like? What processes do we need to have in place? And actually, how do we know we need to override this in the first place? What QA processes are we going to design to do this? And then we need to think about continuous improvement. And that means we're not just going to do a project once on an AI model. AI is constantly evolving. AI is constantly developing. So actually, we need to understand where it's working really well and where it's not working quite so well, and keep looking at how we continually revise it. We obviously know that customer and distribution is a key area. So actually, the more that AI gets embedded in our day-to-day lives, digital expectations increase. So we need intuitive broker interfaces to be used. We need to look at how AI can help us meet the service levels and accelerated service levels. We need to look at communication channels integration. So that's the human and automated interactions. And we also need to understand that it's personalization. So actually, based on what we know about the broker, broker X only writes a certain class of business. Therefore, let's not ask him those questions. Let's make it agile so that actually their interactions and preferences are different. And then we've got governance. So as a risk-averse industry, we know that governance is really, really important for us, but we need to think about model governance. So we need visibility for AI decisions. If MGAs are using AI in their processes and their decision-making, tell your carrier how that works. Make sure you've got it thoroughly documented and it's completely transparent. Can you explain it to how the AI reaches the decision? Because if you can't explain it, it's probably not getting it right. Think about bias. Think about how we're going to detect and how you're going to correct biases, and then make sure that you've got the appropriate compliance documentation to show appropriate oversight. I suspect we're going to need to upskill our compliance teams to be able to do that, because this is stepping outside of kind of your traditional compliance assurance model. I think I'm handing over to Tony now.
Excellent. So if you move to the next slide.
Oh no, you're not. Sorry,
Oh.
that's really bad. Isn't it? Sorry. So what could that mean for MGAs in practice? So we need enhanced customer experiences. So we've got agents, fraud detection, customer experience, and personalised premiums. We need to develop proprietary models based on our data sets. That is the way we're going to actually add value to drive growth and to lower kind of loss ratios. So that could be geospatial analytics for flood risk, cat damage for drone footage, analysis by subclasses, trend identification using all the data sets that you've got in your business to really hone in on where your competitive advantage is. But that needs to be proprietary to your firm. And then we need to have enhanced workflows to drive productivity and support scale. Ultimately, we know that MGAs are resource constrained. We want to try and make things much smoother. This workflow area is a really prime area to start dabbling in if you're looking at doing kind of AI projects, because it doesn't have that bias element that you need to consider. So actually document ingestion. Could we take a policy document, scan it in, and actually get all the data into our policy admin systems? That would reduce costs significantly because you wouldn't have your outsourced providers doing that. Can we do smarter quotes? Can we align incoming requests with risk appetite and prioritise cases accordingly? So actually your team are looking at not no quotes, they're actually looking at ones that potentially you're going to underwrite that fit with your appetite and are going to add value to your business. Can we look at audits? So actually how we do the audit management, how we understand the audit findings, how we follow that up, how we can action them, how we get that into a system. Workflows are the low-hanging fruit in my view. I think the proprietary models are the more complicated areas that we need to look at. But the proprietary models are the ones I think that could add real value to your bottom line in the long term. Now I think it's Tony's turn.
Thanks, Karen. So we're going to take a bit of time looking at the corporate governance frameworks that are needed to manage AI. Next slide, please, Alison. But before we do that, it's not really surprising that regulators of different types all around the world are keeping a really close eye on AI because it's developing so fast and its usage could potentially be so broad. So within kind of UK financial services, the FCA, the PRA, and also Lloyd's have all issued guidance around the use of AI. The International Standards Organization have created an international standard for firms that use AI to ensure that when firms are using AI, they're responsibly developing the AI systems so they're used in the correct way. And then if we look internationally, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners have issued a model bulletin which helps insurers in terms of how they use AI, and that's urging insurers to mitigate any IA-related risks, such as discrimination, bias, data vulnerability, and also a lack of transparency. Next slide, please, Alison. So if we move on to the governance frameworks which are needed to support a kind of successful usage of AI, I think as with any major initiative, it starts right at the top level of the firm. So it's really, it has to be brought into by the firm's governing body, which will typically be the board of directors. And it may be that AI becomes a standing item on agendas of board meetings, or it may be that some firms will even create specific AI committees where they can consider any AI-related risks or ethical issues. And we have to bear in mind that AI is both relatively new, but even more so, incredibly fast-moving. So boards will need regular AI risk assessments as firms develop their AI capabilities and build that out. Boards will need a really good oversight of what's happening so that they can feel confident that things are being done in the right way. One of the things which is absolutely crucial is that boards will need to define who is accountable for AI in terms of how and where and when it's used. And that really kind of dovetails into the senior managers regime, of which a key tenet is the principle of accountability. And the reason the FCA introduced that regime is because they wanted senior management to be accountable for the key things which go on within a business. A firm may need to review its regulatory compliance frameworks to ensure that they meet any insurance-specific rules or guidelines, but also general data protection requirements. And firms that operate kind of internationally will just need to be aware that there may be different protocols and regulations. So whilst they need to be conscious of the ICO, the FCA and the PRA in the UK, they will need to think about the NAIC in the US and also EIOPA if they're operating in Europe. Moving on to risk management, firms that make a significant use of AI will need to create a specific AI risk register, which will allow them to track and monitor and manage any particular risks which are created by their use of AI. And as Karen mentioned earlier, one of the big concerns about AI is that because it will use information and data which is already out there, a lot of that will have some bias attached to it. So you end up with bias effectively being hard-coded into the technology. And that's something which regulators and consumer groups are particularly focused on. So it will be really important that firms are able to demonstrate that the technology works in a fair and transparent manner and actually enhances rather than diminishes customer outcomes. If we can move on to the next slide. So I think if you were to ask a kind of broad section of the general public that weren't especially tech savvy, a lot of them would say their major fear about AI is just the lack of transparency and understanding. And I think we've all experienced situations where you feel as though you're getting a computer says no type response. And that's usually incredibly frustrating for people that are on the end of that decision. So firms will need to be really clear about how decisions are made, and they'll be able to articulate that to customers in a way that it can be readily understood. And we're very guilty sometimes in the industry of using terminology and jargon that we all understand, but firms will need to be able to explain these sorts of things to consumers whose level of understanding of insurance and tech probably won't be at the same level. This kind of moves on to ethics and fairness, and that becomes of absolute paramount importance, where if major decisions relating to pricing or risk acceptance or claim acceptance are largely driven by AI, it's absolutely fundamental that this is done in a fair, transparent and ethical way. Over the decades, the industry has got itself into hot water on a number of occasions, and it's quite easy to imagine the public outcry and the sort of press we would receive if it was found that customers were getting poorer outcomes based off of a faulty AI model. So that's something which I think everyone in the industry which needs to work really hard to prevent that happening. And then finally on this subject, firms that use AI for kind of pricing, actuarial, reserving type purposes will need to have really clear standards and processes in place to make sure that the model is correct and to continually monitor it to ensure that it's providing them the correct information. Because if an insurer is using AI for its cat modelling or its reserving, if it gets that wrong, even by a relatively small factor, that could have a massive impact on that firm's solvency and their ability to trade forward. Next slide, please, Alison. So I think even though kind of particularly things like Gen AI are very sparkly and new, it is worth bearing in mind that the legal frameworks which are in place and apply equally to AI. So we need to be very conscious of that all of the time. We'll look first of all at GDPR. As for UK firms, that's the framework which is going to be the most dominant, I think. So if we move on to the next slide. I think the first thing just to reiterate is that when a firm is using AI, existing GDPR rules and regulations are all still applicable. So a firm will still need a lawful basis for processing data, which may be through consent, contract, or legitimate interest. And a firm should only collect the data which is absolutely necessary and should then only use it for the purposes which the customer has been told that it's going to be used for. Next slide, please. There are some handbrakes, if you like, at the moment on AI. So Article 22 of the UK GDPR gives people the right not to be subject to solely automated decisions which have a legal or similarly significant effect on them. So when we talk about a similarly significant effect, that is something which has a major impact on an individual's circumstances or choices. So I think the example here is it's absolutely fine for Spotify to use automatic decision making to decide what goes on your playlist, but it's not fine for a major organization to use it about some sort of decision which can have a major impact on your well-being or your future. The reality is there's also an additional layer of protection for special category personal data, things like health information. And in those situations, you can only use automatic processing if you have the individual's explicit consent to do so, or if you can show it's a reason of substantial public interest. So I think the truth is within our industry, the latter example won't really apply. So you would always need the individual's explicit consent to do that. And also the normal data subject rights that people have, the right of access, the right to rectification, all of those existing rights, they still exist in the AI world. And the fact that we have this kind of new sparkly technology, it doesn't change any of those points. Next slide, please. So I think one of the sort of common themes we've mentioned a few times is that data transparency is really important, and customers need to be fully aware of how and when AI is used, but also what the appeals processes are. So if they want to challenge a decision, how do they go about that? And how can they have something put right when it appears to be incorrect? All firms these days will have a data privacy notice, which will usually sit prominently upon their website, but it's likely that firms will need to review them in light of the kind of the use of AI and adapt their privacy notice so it reflects how the firm uses AI. And firms which are used to processing significant amounts of data will be used to data protection impact assessments, and these are typically used for processing large volumes of personal data, but firms will need to look at how they might need to be supplemented and augmented going forward to reflect the way in which they use AI within their business. If we could move on to the next one. So the second kind of existing legal framework is the Digital Operational Resilience Act, or DORA, as it's more commonly known. And there are a number of ways in which this will be relevant for firms and their use of AI. So there are very strict reporting requirements around incidents under DORA. So any significant incident has to be reported to the relevant authorities within 4 hours of it occurring. Firms also need a very robust set of operational resilience testing, and this will need to include things like vulnerability assessments, but also the testing needs to cover people, processes, and systems. One of the things which DORA really demands is very strong third-party oversight. So when firms outsource functions to other providers, and this includes both initial due diligence requirements, contractual arrangements, but also ongoing monitoring. So firms will need to think about, if they are outsourcing, are the outsource providers using AI themselves, and how is that operating, and how is that impacting on their customers? And then finally, firms will generally have a business continuity plan, and those will need to be reviewed and tested to reflect the use of AI. And I think probably the key issue there is that as AI becomes more prevalent in our industry, and as firms begin to rely on it more and more, firms will have to think about how will they cope, how will they recover if the AI becomes unavailable for a period of time. So that might require quite a bit of work in terms of updating business continuity plans and how the firm will kind of bounce back from a loss of AI and still be able to operate in a kind of efficient manner and meet the needs of their customers. If we could move on to the next one. So I think most people in the industry would agree that product governance is one of the thorniest and probably most time-consuming aspects of the kind of modern compliance world. And I think this is an area where AI could really make quite a big difference for firms and make quite a significant impact in terms of making firms more efficient and cutting out wasted effort. If we move on to the next slide. So one of the key cornerstones of product governance is defining a target market, and AI can really improve that because by leveraging data analytics, predictive modeling, and things like machine learning, a firm is able to create a more precise and dynamic market segmentation. And one of the things the regulator is really keen on is target market assessment being done at a really granular level, and that they generally feel at the moment it's too broad brush. Fair value assessments are part of the product governance process, which tends to take up an awful amount of firms' time. And even though it looks as though firms are going to be given a bit more leeway in terms of how often these are done under the FCA's new rules, it's still a kind of a long, laborious process. However, if you think of the different types of AI, the way it can look at vast amounts of structured and unstructured data, it could really help firms in getting a holistic view of product value. So this could include kind of simultaneously analysing things like customer transactions, claims history, customer service interactions, complaints, policy cancellations and renewals, and other types of market data. And using machine learning, all those disparate sorts of data can be analysed far quicker than they would be by a human, and probably with far less margin for error. One of the areas where firms struggle a bit is that ideally there should be a quantitative but also a qualitative approach to fair value. And the qualitative approach is very difficult because if you get a very large number of customer reviews, but these are all just kind of narrative-driven pieces of data, it can be incredibly time-consuming to read through all of those and pull out the central themes. But using natural language processing, you could analyse customer feedback, complaints, survey responses, even your social media mentions, and that would allow you to gauge customer satisfaction and perceived value in a much more sort of qualitative manner and give you some comfort as what customers really felt about your product. And it's that sort of qualitative data which would actually be incredibly useful as firms gear up for their Consumer Duty Board reports later in the year. It's that sort of information which can sit alongside the quantitative data, which will enable you to give a much more robust of the product value that your products provide. So I think that's the last of my slides. So if we could move on to the next slide, Alison, and it's back to Karen.
Okay, so Tanya gave you a really good example there of how data and information is at the heart of a process such as product governance, and actually how you could get a really good view of the customer from that. So if we go to the next slide. What I'm saying here is that AI systems are only as good as their data. Tony's talked about all the different data that you might want to put together to create a real view of customer, but if that's a poor data set, it's not going to work. So the business impact of poor data is 15 to 25% of UK operational costs are attributed to poor quality data. 59% of insurers say data quality is their primary obstacle to AI adoption. And actually, insurance firms spend 3 to 6 months on data preparation for analytics projects. And actually, 28% of insurance executives abandoned AI initiatives due to data challenges. So AI isn't going to solve your data problems. It's probably going to expose more data problems than you're already aware of. And actually, we need to put data at the heart of everything if we're going to try and use that to actually do some predictive analytics or machine learning, or to really pull out the key points and analyze big data sets to really understand what's going on at ground level in our firm. Next slide. So how does quality data drive AI success? We want clean, accurate data that will provide reliable insights and also will reduce false positives. We need complete data sets, because how are we going to get a view of the full pattern if we haven't got those? We need consistencies so that actually AI models can learn when we upload either a particularly bordereau standard or a particular data set. How do we know the correct relationships? How does AI link all of these data sets if they're constantly changing? And actually, how do we keep data sets current, because that will keep AI recommendations relevant? And I know we have a problem, for example, in the kind of some sub-delegated portfolios where we actually only get our data sort of 30 to 45 days down the line. We need to make sure that we have a data first foundation. So we need to make sure we have established data governance frameworks before you kick off AI implementation. If you try to do an AI implementation with poor data sets, you're going to be one of the 28% that probably abandon things. Actually, if you're going to do it as a test and learn to see how good your data sets are, that's a different criteria, and that's also a different outcome for your project. So just be clear, if you're going to use a data set, understand the limitations of it, understand how good your data is before you start embarking on some of these projects. Spend some time investing in a data infrastructure as the bedrock of your AI capability. So AI isn't just about getting Google in to do some great work for you. Actually, you need the data and the information to be able to make that happen. And we need to focus on data quality. Now, I've been working in this market for far too long, and data quality has been a hot topic of information probably over the last 15 years of work that I've been working here. And actually, I don't think anyone's got it nailed. And we all know data quality takes time to improve. It's a long, laborious process, and it's never finished. So keep making sure that you have data quality metrics, you understand what they are, you think about the accuracy, you think about the completeness, you think about what you can do from an automation perspective, you think about what you can do from a human AI perspective. And I think it's also about making sure that your team are data literate. So you need a data capability, not just in a data team embedded within IT, but you need data owners within your business. You need to make sure that everybody is competent and capable with data, and you need to not expect this to happen overnight. This needs to happen day in, day out, and be embedded within your operation. Next slide, please. So I think AI allows MGA businesses to be disruptors, right? That's what you're here for. You're here to do things, you're here to be nimble, you're here to be agile, you're here to do things that some of the big insurers can't do because of all the frameworks and controls they have around you. That's your unique selling points. And you can gain advantage from AI because you're slap bang in the middle of that insurance value chain, and you can use the data intelligence to demonstrate value to both upstream in your carriers and downstream to your distribution partners. This should make, using AI for data, should make your carriers more sticky, your distribution partners more sticky, and allow you to refine your book to get these profit shares. So if you're a disruptor and you're using data to enable AI, you need to be thinking of data as a revenue generator, not a business cost. Now, we know all those data projects always cost a lot of money, take a lot of time, and actually what value do we get out of it? But actually, data is your competitive advantage. Data will generate revenue if you get it right. Understand the value of having your data in one place, and make sure data and insights are on a product by product basis. We shouldn't just have a data project. We should actually have data embedded in all of your project teams. We should have MI embedded in all of your product teams. It should be the bedrock of everything that you do. And actually you need to leverage external data sources to drive further insight. So one data set on their own will tell you a certain amount. Actually, if you mix it with other purchased data sets from other people, you can actually get a lot of insight and information. And actually that's what drives real value. And then my other point is knowledge is power. So your people are your key, and actually they need to be educated and trained in data and in AI. All AI is business driven based on business problems that need solving. You can't just create an AI strategy. You need to be thinking about what business problems do I have that are causing my business a problem, and actually how could AI help me to solve those? And I think going back to this point is, if we were starting again with a blank piece of paper, what would we do differently, knowing the technology that we now have around us? There is immense potential here for MGA businesses. AI could transform your business, but it's worth noting that AI now is going to be different from AI in 6 months' time to AI in a year's time. These tools are going to constantly evolve. So a huge waterfall project is not what you want to do. You want to do agile, small sprints of technology improvement using AI, or process improvement using AI that's going to add value to your business now. And you're going to keep iterating and keep moving. This is not a once and done project. This is a continuous improvement program. Next slide. Thank you for all of that. Are there any questions for either myself or Tony?
I had a quick look in the chat. Just realised I haven't got my camera on, but I'll just keep talking for a moment. I had a look in the chat. There's nothing been submitted, but I have a quick question which will allow people a little bit of typing time, because we do have time left in the session. I know that you've referenced how data can be if your data's not there, that can be a big problem if you're looking at bringing in AI. What would you say is the second most sort of prevalent reason that AI projects might derail?
I actually think it's the business problem. I think we as an industry, so I think, first of all, everyone's talking about AI and everyone's worried about missing out because they think all their competitors are doing stuff at the moment. Yes, people are doing things, but actually this is going to be an iterative build. So, don't worry about it. It's better to get it right, and it's better to focus on a use case that is actually going to achieve some value for you than it is to try and do a big ticket, I'm going to transform my business with AI and do this kind of long drawn out piece of work. AI isn't the solution. You have to go back to what the problem is. So is your problem you're spending too much on an outsourced provider who's doing data input for you? And actually that could save me £500,000 a year, right? That's a huge cost on someone's bottom line. Actually, how could AI help me to solve that problem? Is it, I think, actually my claims fraud detection is not good enough because we're getting too many fraudulent claims and we're finding out about these things further down the line, or we're missing them. That's costing me X amount of pounds per year. It's about identifying that business problem and then picking up something bite-sized that you could use. I think the other thing is find the right partner. So, there are lots of tech whizzes out there. There are lots of firms that are saying they're doing things in AI. There's lots of vendors that are doing quite a lot of work with AI. Straight through processing from SLIP to policy admin system is an area that sort of screams that someone should do some improvement to. However, if your tech vendor, if your policy admin system can't ingest data from a third party, they're not AI ready. And if they're not AI ready, how are they going to get AI ready? And are they the right partner for you longer term? So I think we've got legacy technology floating around that's going to cause us some problems. I think people not focusing on actual business problems and the thing that they're trying to solve will cause us issues. And I think data, trying to use the data to gain those insights when the data you haven't got is robust enough is another area.
Thank you very much. And someone has typed away, and we have a question for you. So MGAs, brokers and carriers will all be working towards implementing their own AI tools. Do you think there should be an alignment stroke market tools to use rather than separate company tools?
I think that's a really interesting point, and I think there is definitely some merit in us getting together and trying to do some of this. So if we look at, let's take the outsourcing example that I've used at the moment. There's we've got kind of UK-based outsourcers, we've got offshore-based outsourcers. If you move from a UK outsourcer to an offshore outsourcer, tends to cost you about 50% less, right? Those outsourcers are currently working on how do we reduce that even more. So they're going to use AI to get rid of their 20-man team and turn that into 2 men doing exception reporting. We are still going to be paying for that as individual companies. So actually, if we got together as an industry and said, actually, how are we going to do ingestion tools? We want to take away that data entry piece. Could we do that? And I think as an industry, we do need to be getting together to think about that. That said, we know how difficult some of these market initiatives are to get off the ground. And so it's really difficult to work out how to do that. I think in the NGA space, it's even more prevalent because you've got like 60, 70, 80 kind of policy admin systems out there that people are using. When we go to the NGA conference in a couple of weeks' time, it will be tech vendors, lots and lots of tech vendors. So there isn't one kind of source of the truth. But yeah, I think we do owe it to ourselves to be sharing some of this stuff. And sharing our experiences, because I think we could, as an industry, we could do more together.
I think what's also will be really interesting to see there is that whether it's kind of industry-led or whether just certain providers just rise to the top as the kind of the brand names that everyone uses. So, once upon a time, if we wanted to know something on the internet, we might ask Jeeves or we might Yahoo, but now pretty much everyone just Googles. That's the only thing they would do. So it'll be interesting to see if one or two or a small number of providers just become the kind of de facto market tools because they are adopted so widely, or whether it does need a bit more of a kind of a nudge from the industry and a bit more of a cohesive approach.
Thank you. It was very, very interesting and took me back a bit with reference to Ask Jeeves. I'd forgotten all about that one. It's how quick Google takes over. So we haven't got any more questions on there. I need to ask politely for people to complete the survey when we send it through to the link to the recording. So what I'm doing is trying to buy some time in case anyone's typing. So we have got a couple of minutes left, but just in case, I'll pass on my thank you. So thank you to Tony and Karen for that. It was very informative and demystified a little bit of the AI side of things. So thank you very much. And I'm sure you're okay with us sharing the slides, so we'll share those with the presentation, and I'm sure that if anyone has any questions that come to mind later, they'll be able to contact you.
Yep.
So yes, so that leaves me to thank you very much, and thank you everyone for attending, and enjoy your afternoons.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.